Number 10, Old King Phoenix Thor. So some people say that this would probably be the most powerful version of Thor. And oh boy, it's probably true. Imagine Thor with his own powers, but also the power of the Phoenix Force. That's when you get Old King Phoenix Thor, who just also looks really, really cool. This Thor is a lot older and wiser, but ends up getting defeated by Wolverine, who was harnessing the power of the Phoenix Force. But then Wolverine ends up getting killed by Dr. Doom, and it is given to Thor. And I mean, the rest is history. Number 9, Rogue Thor. Okay, so this version of Thor comes from Marvel's What If series. Something a lot of fans will become a lot more familiar with because they're making a Disney Plus series about it, with MCU characters, which will actually be really cool. So, this one tells the story about what if Rogue, the X-Men, had the powers of Thor. In the story, Rogue ends up killing Thor by absorbing his powers and then kind of goes evil. I mean, she goes on a killing spree, killing a lot of people. It's not all bad though. She doesn't stay evil forever. I mean, the spirit of Thor eventually convinces her to use her powers for good, and she does. But come on, she went crazy, and it happened, but just not in the main continuity, of course, because that would just be really, really dark. Number 8, Frost Giant Thor. Okay, so Frost Giant Thor comes from Marvel's What If series, and during it, it presents the idea of what would have happened if Odin got killed by Laufey and raised Thor himself. Loki and Thor still are not really close in this version, but Loki's kind of the good guy. He wants to leave and go to Earth, but Thor doesn't want that and tries to stop him, and he accidentally ends up killing his mother, Frigga. Thor is devastated by what he's done and ends up letting Loki go, and Loki lives a nice life on Earth. I mean, it's pretty dark for Thor, but at least Loki got a happy ending this time. Number 7, Hellbound Thor. Hellbound Thor isn't from Marvel's main Earth. He comes from Earth 5113, or also known as the Dormammuverse, which is named after, yes, Dormammu from Doctor Strange. In this universe, Dormammu is the ruler and has turned Thor, plus a lot of other famous Marvel heroes, into his minions, who will do anything for him. They all have new looks, and this version of Thor is very, very different. He's like really straight up scary. Yeah, he wasn't a big part of this story, so there's not a lot of information about him. But look-wise, he has his classic suit, but with a demon face, but he has all of his normal powers. Number 6, Thorion. Sometimes Marvel and DC cross over. It happens, and one time they did, some of their heroes merged together. This was the case with Thor and Orion, to form Thorion. He was super powerful, and get this, he is the son of Thanos. That's Thanos and Darkseid merged together. Like, that's so cool, and is probably the scariest villain combo you could ever have. But this isn't technically canon, it's in its own universe, but it was pretty cool to see. It's always a treat whenever Marvel and DC decide to work together. Hopefully we see more of it in the future. Number 5, Revenger Thor. Yeah, it's called the Revengers because I'm getting revenge and you're getting revenge. Do you want revenge? Okay, so that quote was from Thor Ragnarok, but that version of the Revengers doesn't have any connections to Revenger Thor. But I just wanted to put that quote in there because, yeah, it was fun. Alrighty, so Revenger Thor comes from an alternate universe, Earth 10011, also known as the Cancerverse. In that universe, Thor is part of a team called the Revengers. And as you guessed, they are evil. They are basically the evil counterparts of the Avengers, which is kind of cool. They end up getting defeated by Thanos, which is also pretty crazy since they usually end up defeating him. But in this version, or this universe, Thanos is the hero, and he saves the day. 4, Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill, a character that is very popular with fans and long overdue for a live-action appearance. Beta Ray Bill is a character that is very popular with fans and long overdue for a live-action appearance. If you're not familiar, Beta Ray Bill is an alien who was able to pick up Thor's hammer. No one was expecting it to happen, but it happened. He didn't keep it, obviously, but he did end up getting his own cool hammer. The whole thing started when Nick Fury sent Thor up to investigate a spaceship, and he ran into Beta Ray Bill, and the two of them were like, hey, fight. But during that fight, he picked up Thor's hammer. Now, he was teased in Thor Ragnarok, so maybe that means that the MCU is slowly leading up to an appearance? I mean, only time will tell, guys. Number 3, Zombie Thor. Need I say more? No. Number 2. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, Zombie Thor comes from the Marvel Zombie series, which was written by Walking Dead creator Robert Kirkman. It takes place on Earth 2149, and on that Earth, a zombie virus ends up infecting almost all the heroes and villains of the Marvel universe. Thor is one of those heroes. So he looked very cool and terrifying at the same time. But one of the most interesting things about this version is that since he was technically dead, he was no longer worthy of Mjolnir. So, Zombie Thor didn't have it. He ended up getting his own hammer later on. but he didn't have Mjolnir, and that was something that I thought was very, very interesting. Number 2, Venom Thor. Yep, this one is real, like no joke. Venom Thor. Man, just the name is terrifying, because you know Venom Thor is a deadly combo. But, like Rogue Thor and all the other ones, this one happens during one of Marvel's What If stories. What if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man? In the story, Venom takes over Spider-Man, but then continues to take him over, and then Hulk. But of course, he doesn't stop there. He's like, maybe I should take over some more heroes. And he decides to take over Thor. Venom takes over Thor and gets all of his powers. I mean, imagine if this happened in the main continuity. Venom would be virtually unstoppable because he retains all of the powers he takes. So he would have the powers of Spider-Man, Hulk, and Thor. Who would be able to stop him? No one. He would just rule the earth forever. Number 1, Unworthy Thor. This is one of the coolest versions of Thor, like ever. The reason he is so different is because this is Thor when he is unworthy of Mjolnir. He has short hair, a massive battle axe, ripped clothes, and one arm. His other arm was chopped off by Malekith and replaced with Black Uru. This look was part of the inspiration for Thor's look in the film Thor Ragnarok, which was freaking amazing. This story really breaks Thor down and shows who he is without the hammer. Honestly, it really works, and stories like this help characters grow. And Thor, or known as Son, learns a lot of valuable lessons during this arc, and becomes a better hero for it. I mean, he even fought Thanos during this comic, and it was pretty damn epic. Thor is just so cool. I can't wait to see where Marvel takes him next.
Number 10, Infinity. While Infinity is a story that is much bigger than Thor himself, his role in this story was pretty dark. He was forced to destroy a builder, blowing a clean hole through this alien creature. Thor was sent as Earth's emissary to negotiate their surrender and bow down to the will of the builders. But in reality, the Avengers had a trick up their sleeve and double-crossed the alien race who threatened the existence of the Earth and many other planets. Thor summoned his hammer Mjolnir from far away, smashing a hole clean through the builder's chest and proving just how terrifying of a foe he can be when needed, and how when needed, Thor will not hesitate to kill his opponents, like some other heroes might. After smashing a hole through the builder's chest, he finished them off with a hammer to the head. Splat. Number 9. If He Be Worthy. Dark stories usually come out of times when Thor is no longer worthy, and this is also one of those times. This story kicked off the 2014 run of Thor, where Thor lost his arm in a fight with Malekith. We were also first introduced to the initially mysterious Lady Thor in this issue, who was deemed worthy when it came to wielding Mjolnir and retrieving it from the moon, where it remained when no other Asgardians seemed able to lift it. Thor's loss of his arm would lead to him being very depressed for quite a while, and would in this case add injury to insult, as he was already reeling emotionally from being unable to retrieve Mjolnir. Although he would eventually get a sweet Black Uru arm crafted because Odin refused to accept an armless son. Kinda rude. And likely added more stress to Thor to hear his dad say that. Sounds like, I'm not gonna have a son that's useless. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Just because he lost an arm he's useless? Rude. Number 8. Sundown. This story is both beautiful and dark, heart-wrenching and bright all at once. It's tragic. And hey, just because the story is dark doesn't mean it can't feature electric and bright colors, which of course in this issue comes from the amazing Matthew Wilson. Sheesh, I love this guy's colors. They're always so beautiful. In issue 705 of Mighty Thor, we watch a super sick Jane Foster as Lady Thor take on Mangog, and pretty much kill herself during the fight. In the end, she is forced to sacrifice Mjolnir in order to defeat Mangog, launching the villain and her hammer into the sun. Due to the fact that Jane was battling cancer at the time, every time she changed into Thor, due to that whole process, the progress of her chemo basically gets erased. And when she removes her helmet and changes back this time, she knows it will be her last. Her and Thor share one last kiss as she changes back from Thor to a very sickly and cancer-ridden Jane Foster, and she appears to die. Some truly bleak and beautiful writing here from Jason Aaron. Number 7. Midgard's Final Doom. In 2018's Thor, we get a flip back and forth between a younger Thor and an older future Thor, king of Asgard, but also the last Asgardian left. No matter what this version of Thor does as well, it seems there is nothing he can do to prevent the Earth from dying. But that doesn't mean he's not going to stop trying. In issue number 6, his main threat is a future Doom, who is also Sorcerer Supreme in this future timeline. King Thor is joined by his old pal, Phoenix Force Wolverine, who ends up sacrificing his life imbuing Mjolnir with the Phoenix Force in order to help King Thor defeat Doom and save the world. Well, try to save the world. As beautiful as the art is, the story itself is pretty grim. Grim, but spectacular. Number 6. Thor First Thunder. Near the end of this story, Thor gives into warrior madness, and we see just how destructive Thor can be when his rage is left unchecked. He wreaks havoc on Manhattan, nearly killing Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, as well as Jane Foster, while working in tandem alongside his brother Loki. In the end, he regains his senses, but for a while there, it was looking like Thor would have destroyed it all, burned it all, and blown it all down with his mighty power. You do not want to mess with an angry Thor, I'll tell you that much. Number 5. Thor versus the mysterious radioactive man. This was a story about Thor that actually appeared in the original Journey into Mystery series. Yeah, not all dark stories need to come from present day comics, by the way. In fact, without likely realizing it at the time, some of the darkest moments in comics history have actually come to us from incredulously outdated moments way back in the past. Journey into Mystery gives us one such story and moment. In this comic, we see Thor attempt to take on villain Radioactive Man. In this issue, we find out Radioactive Man's backstory as a nuclear physicist from China who gained radioactive powers. He was then sent on a mission to New York to challenge and defeat Thor. The ending of the story is what is the dark part though. When Thor attempted to send Radioactive Man back to China in a tornado, which Radioactive Man explained would cause him to reach critical mass before he touched down, Thor showed no regard for the innocent lives that could be affected and destroyed by basically the nuclear bomb that Radioactive Man would become on impact. As far as he was concerned, that was Radioactive Man in China's problem, not his. Wow. And he says that in the comic too. Yikes. Number 4. Ragnarok. Or at least one of. This Ragnarok story took place in 1998's Thor, starting in issue 80. It was part of the Avengers Disassembled event. Here we basically saw Thor take on a resurrected Surtur, who was brought back by Loki. Loki, what did you do? Surtur and his army took on the gods, defeating them one by one. Thor learned, however, that this was all part of a cycle, and that the gods were destined to fail and be reborn, giving energy to those who sit above in shadow. In other words, the gods of the gods. The story ends with Thor disrupting this resurrection cycle by basically destroying a tapestry, but at the supposed cost of his life and the lives of his people. At the end of the series, he's believed dead by his fellow comrades and heroes, though in reality he wasn't quite dead yet, but instead was revealed to be in a slumber-like stasis, resting before returning. Number 3. The Devourer King. This is the first arc in Donny Cates' Thor run, which just started earlier this year in January of 2020. The series started off with completely giving him a new dark look and dark and immensely powerful villain to go along with this look, who we'd see fully revealed at the end of issue number 4, the Black Winter, also known as the Star Plague. The Black Winter is the cosmic force that was known for wiping out the entire universe prior to the one that we have now, way back when Galen became Galactus. In fact, Thor is even forced to team up with Galactus in order to take on the Black Winter, and the frightening thing is, by comparison, both of these characters appear small, standing next to the celestial shadow of a monster that is the Black Winter. And also, Thor is pretty OP at this point, so that's something. Number 2. The God Butcher. The whole universe wasn't threatened by this villain in Jason Aaron's run, but all of the gods certainly were, and I mean all of the gods. In the story arc known as the God Butcher, we were introduced to Gore, a fearsome and well-written villain. Gore learns of the gods and basically blames them for everyone's suffering, and so sets out on a mission to kill them, armed with the Necro Sword, also known as the All Black, which we later discover via Donny Cates also happened to be the first symbiote. It's all connected, ooh. Which I love. Gore at one point also threatened all of the gods' existence with his own god bomb as well, which would kill all gods across all timelines and realities. A pretty scary reality for someone like Thor. Number 1. The Mighty Thor, Lord of Asgard. Or I guess you could just call it Lord of Asgard. I think we all know what we're talking about when we say that. This story quickly becomes quite dark. Thor ends up taking over for Odin as King of Asgard after his father is killed in a battle by Surtur. In this story, we saw Thor not only command Asgard, but also decide to conquer and rule over Midgard, aka Earth. Those who oppose his rule are severely punished, locked away, or killed, and Thor basically becomes a tyrant. He also marries Enchantress and has a son with her. Eventually he realizes how awful his actions have been and how wrong he was when his son Magni, who has fallen in love with a human woman, confronts him. In the end, Thor decides the best course of action is to change the timeline so that none of this ever happened, erasing this bleak story and therefore causing it to be considered an alternate timeline in retrospect.
Number 10. Why is he unworthy? What better way to start off this list with actually talking about why the heck there is an unworthy Thor in the first place? As some of you know, Gore the God Butcher was a rather significant enemy for Thor. He killed many other gods and threatened to end them all, and he was fueled by his belief that gods were full of hubris and pride and that the universe would be way better off without them. Even after Gor's defeat, this idea would haunt Thor, and it ultimately came back to strike him again in a fight with Nick Fury on the moon. Nick Fury, along with a few other characters, including Thor, had all learned secrets from the eye of Uatu the Watcher, with Nick Fury learning of Thor's own self-doubt after his fight with Gorr. So in the climax of Original Sin, all Nick Fury had to do was whisper in Thor's ear that Gorr was right. These 3 words were enough to riddle Thor with enough self-doubt to drop his hammer and become unworthy. Number 9. Jane Foster. After Thor became unworthy, his mighty hammer Mjolnir ended up in the hands of Jane Foster, who was dying of cancer. Picking up the fallen hammer, Jane became the new mysterious wielder of the power of Thor, and became one of the coolest iterations of the character in my opinion. The original Thor initially came into conflict against Jane, but eventually accepted that the hammer was no longer his to wield. He believed himself unworthy of his own name, which to him was more of a title. He passed the title of Thor off to Jane Foster, not exactly knowing who she was, and decided to go only by his surname. Number 8. Odin's son. After giving up the name or mantle of Thor, this unworthy Thor decided to now only go by the name Odin's son. And you know what? There is still a hell of a lot of power behind that name. Even without Mjolnir, Odin's son is still half Elder God and half Asgardian, and an extremely strong Asgardian too, considering he is the god of strength. He also still has more stamina than almost all other Asgardians, he is still incredibly durable, still incredibly fast, still immortal, still a master warrior, and he is still able to wield the lightning. Beyond that, he has the help of his allies who he has gained over the thousands of years he's been alive. He also has an incredibly cool looking black Uru arm after Malekith cut off his normal arm. Oh, and he wields a weapon he is still all too familiar with. Number 7. Jarnbjorn. Jarnbjorn was the dwarven forged battle axe composed of Asgardian steel and created for Rana, one of the original members of the Valkyrie. After she mysteriously disappeared, having been assimilated by the Headless Celestial, Jarnbjorn was stored in Asgard's armory and eventually taken up by the younger Thor a long time before he was ever able to wield the mighty Mjolnir. Eventually, after a lot of stuff involving Celestials, King the Conqueror, and the Apocalypse Twins, Jarnbjorn was replaced in the Asgardian armory. When Thor could no longer wield Mjolnir after his battle with Nick Fury on the moon, Thor took up Jarnbjorn once again. While fighting Malekith and a force of frost giants under the sea, Malekith took Jarnbjorn from Thor and used it to cut off his left arm. Odin's son is a weapons master, familiar with every Asgardian weapon, but when he becomes unworthy, it makes sense that he would go back to wielding this awesome axe that was his faithful weapon in his youth. Number 6. Tooth Gnasher. When Thor became unworthy to wield Mjolnir, he also lost the powers it bestowed on him, including flight. As such, he needs a bit of help from time to time. While he has many friends and allies across the universe, everyone knows that a boy's strongest connection is with his giant Asgardian pet goat. Tooth Gnasher is one of a pair of goats that are pets to Thor and who, in the mythology, would help pull Thor's chariot. In the unworthy Thor story, his one goat, Tooth Gnasher, is Odin's son's companion, mainly used to help Thor travel through space and fly to where he needs to go. But he is also perfectly capable of helping Thor in battle. He is an Asgardian goat, and as such is super goat strong. He's even capable of damaging Mjolnir. Obviously, Tooth Gnasher is capable of traveling between the 10 realms and both running and flying at super high speeds. And we love this awesome space goat, yes we do. Number 5. His quest? In the unworthy Thor story that was Odin's son's main solo Marvel run, we learn that the hammer of Ultimate Thor had survived the incursions and traveled through universes to eventually land in the 616 Reality's Asgard realm, which is currently in ruins. Odin's son learns that the whole ruined realm of Asgard has been taken by an elder of the universe, the Collector, who is trying to wield the hammer for himself, but he is unworthy, obviously. Odin's son travels to the Collector's ship and battles furiously against the Collector and some of Thanos' Black Order, mainly Proxima Midnight and Black Swan, and a mysterious third character. While Odin's son is worthy of this ultimate hammer, this is not his hammer. And after using lightning to defeat the villainous forces, he decides to bring Asgard back where it belongs and leaves the ultimate Thor's hammer here, where a certain somebody wields it to become War Thor. Number 4. Beta Ray Bill. Almost as if the unworthy Thor story is a greatest hits, a lot of the best and favorite Thor characters show up here. one that everybody loves to see, is the last existing Corbinite and wielder of Stormbreaker, Odin's son's worthy brother, Beta Ray Bill. Beta Ray Bill first showed up way back in Thor number 333 in August of 1983, and he was the first character to ever be worthy of wielding the Hammer of Mjolnir, as far as I'm aware. Bill meets up with Odin's son when he discovers that Asgard is no longer where it should be and has been taken by the Collector, and he fights alongside Odin's son to both help return Asgard and to help Thor wield his new hammer. Beta Ray Bill is an amazing character. He is crazy powerful, and while not native to Asgard, he is loyal to both Odin and Thor, even offering up Stormbreaker to Odin's son when he realized he had become unworthy. A better friend you'll be hard pressed to find. Number 3. Mangog. Sometime after the events of Unworthy Thor and after Jane Foster Thor had been challenged by the Shi'ar gods, the Mangog, one of the most powerful entities in all of Marvel Comics, was released and resurfaced, attacking War Thor when he reclaimed the Ultimate Universe Mjolnir. When Asgardia's Watcher, Heimdall, lowered his head for a moment, Mangog attacked with blinding speed and fury. All the defenders of Asgardia tried their best to defend their home. Odin's son stood by his father's side, but they failed to stop this creature. Odin's son assisted Jane Foster Thor in fighting the monster while his people evacuated Asgardia. In order to put an end to the Mangog, Jane fastened it to Mjolnir with an unbreakable chain and hurled them into the sun. Since his action resulted in Mjolnir's destruction, Jane returned to her human form and passed away due to her cancer. Number 2. Thor again? Unwilling to let Jane go after she passed, Odin's son attempted to channel the god Tempest to use its power to revive her. Odin joined him too, since he had seen the hesitation within Jane's own soul at the gates of the afterlife, and they were successful in bringing her back. With the destruction of Mjolnir and her inability to continue as Thor, Jane convinced Odin's son to rise up again and reclaim his name and identity. Odin's son finally became Thor again, but alas, he still did not have his mighty hammer. Not that he needs it to be the amazing character we all know he is, but still. Number 1. Worthy again. In order to find a way to overcome the returned Malekith, Thor nailed himself to Yggdrasil, the world tree, which had taken root in the sun. Because that makes sense. After sacrificing his left eye and the last shards of Mjolnir in his possession, Thor figured to recruit his older and younger selves, the ones that he had defeated Gorr the God Butcher with. The three of them were joined by Jane Foster, who had temporarily returned to her Thor form by the rebuilt hammer of the War Thor. During battle against Malekith, who had empowered himself with the Venom symbiote, the god Tempest manifested in the sun and Thor commanded it from Earth to reforge Mjolnir in an extremely awesome moment. The hammer came down and landed right in front of Thor Odin's son, and he, having realized that his struggle to become worthy in itself was what made him worthy, picked up his hammer. Thor used Mjolnir to deliver the final blow that defeated Malekith. After this awesome heroic act, Odin stepped down as Asgardia's Allfather and appointed Thor as the new Allfather of Asgardia. Awesome.